In a few seconds, the Rediffusion production, This Week, The Arts. But first I'd like to mention that there'll be full coverage of Wimbledon 1967 on independent television, starting on Monday afternoon at 1:45.
In tonight's programme, we're going to look at one of the increasing number of talented ballet companies in this country. But first, the big news of this week in the arts, censorship, or rather, a proposal to abolish it. For generations, anyone in Britain who wanted to put on a play has had to get permission for it in advance from the Lord Chamberlain. He's an official of the Queen's household, and therefore, of course, not elected and not answerable to anyone who is. And the stage is the only form of art or communication in this country which is subject to compulsory censorship. Well, the day before yesterday, a joint committee of both Houses of Parliament and all the main political parties published a unanimous report in which they proposed that this censorship should be abolished and nothing put in its place. It says there should be no voluntary self-censorship of the kind they have in the film industry and no censorship by local authorities. They think the theatre should just be subject to the common law like everything and everyone else. They recommend, though, that the Obscene Publications Act should be extended to plays and other performances, and heavy fines imposed on people in the theatre found guilty of breaking it. Well, now, Michael Foot, you were one of the people on the committee that produced this report. What chance do you think it's got of becoming law?
I think it's got every chance, particularly because of the committee reporting unanimously. When there was a previous committee that examined the whole question of theatre censorship in the year 1909, they recommended 50 years ago or more that the thing should be abolished, but they were very narrowly divided and therefore nothing was done about it. But on this occasion I believe that the fact that everybody on the committee has eventually agreed will mean that the government will support a measure of this kind if it's introduced by a private member, or at any rate provide time for it, and I think it'll go through in the next session of the House of Parliament.
Who do you expect to oppose it?
I suppose there will be a few who will oppose it, but again I emphasize that all the arguments that we went through have been such that all those who argued against the change in the committee have eventually subdued or withdrawn their opposition, and therefore I think that will happen in the House of Commons. Maybe some will still vote against it, but I think we'll have a big majority.
Why did you rule out alternative forms of censorship like the one they have in the film industry? That has surprised a lot of people, I think.
Well, it doesn't exactly rule it out. That the film industry has a voluntary censorship of its own. But what we were opposed to, and this was the biggest argument in the committee, the main point of dissension, everybody there was in favor of abolishing the Lord Chamberlain as the censor, but some people argued that there ought to be a kind of system of a voluntary censorship whereby any playwright or play producer could get a kind of certificate from a body saying that this was a proper play to be produced, and that they would then be guaranteed against any prosecution, leaving anyone to put on a play if they wanted to, still without pre-censorship, but running the risk of a prosecution. Now, we were against that primarily because we thought that would mitigate against the adventurous play. It would make it more likely that adventurous plays would be prosecuted, and this was the matter on which we discussed in greater detail than possibly any other subject, and we came to the conclusion, I think quite rightly, that the simplest solution was the best.